the airline and the aviation industry. And we're bringing to you positive information and positive news about the aviation industry and how we can all contribute as leaders in the industry toward the recovery of the industry. And so I invite you for the next 30 minutes or so to join us and be part of our discussion. But hey, I want to kick it off with this discussion here, is that as pilot in command, who is in charge? And do you have the ability to be able to make decisions necessary in the extent that you need to in an emergency? All right. And today I have a couple of guests with us that we're going to spend some time talking about the industry, and we're going to talk about what can you do specifically and what are the factors of success that are going to allow all of us to be able to contribute to the success of the recovery of the airline industry. So let me introduce our guests to you right now. All right. Good morning. I have Thanos, who is a CEO of Aerosoft in Toronto, Canada. Thanos, how are you this morning?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. And then we also have Larry Little, who's a retired Boeing employee and actively involved in digital transformation with me in this industry. Larry, how are you this morning?
Hey, Mark, good morning. Hey, and Thanos, good morning to you as well.
Good morning, Larry.
Great. It's really good to have you guys online. And Larry, you're located in the Seattle area, right?
Yes, I am, Mark.
Great. And Thanos, you're up in Canada. So some of our discussions are going to be focused on what's happening up in Canada today. Right?
Yes, very much so. It's April the 24th today, but we had almost freezing temperatures overnight. So there you go.
Excellent. All right. Well, guys, thanks for joining us, and let's just jump right in. Hey, the first thing we want to talk about.
Let's remind people. Last week we kind of kicked this off, and we're going to continue to do this on a weekly basis. But it's really about how we go forward positively with all the things that are going on in the industry, and I don't think we're going to talk too much about all the situations that we know really well. It's more about how do us as leaders really shape the future.
Yeah, it's really a good point, Larry, is that there's so much news about the problems we're having in the industry. And what we really want to do is we want to rally leaders in the industry to really come up with ideas and innovations and how we can bring our industry to recovery. So you're very right, Larry. Thanks for pointing that out so much so.
Yeah, this is really a group hug. It's not a group hug. This is really about how do we leaders be proactive about changing our people. Absolutely.
Okay, so first of all, we want to kick it off a little bit with some discussion about what's happening really within the industry right now. And I know that as people around the world are watching this broadcast, this live broadcast right now, is people want to know what's happening in different areas. So we invited a guest this morning, Thanos, CEO of Aerosoft, to join us from Canada, so he could give us a little bit of a perspective of what's happening, up there in Canada. So, Thanos, what are you seeing happening with respect to the aviation industry, up there in Canada right now?
Well, with everybody else, we do read the news on the websites of the carriers and so on. They've obviously delayed most of their international flights, and there are very, very limited domestic flights taking place. They're making various announcements on how, when they go back online, how they will have changes in service and so on and so forth with items like food dispensing and issues like that. We're also looking globally to see what some other leaders are doing. We found it interesting to see the Emirates doing that triage before they board the passengers and so on. And so what is known is, what is I think understood from our perspective, is that the industry will come back online and they'll have to do many, many things differently. So that's the critical aspect. And in doing so,
we should back up just a little bit. Hey, Thanos, just tell everybody what Aerosoft does.
Yeah, we provide software to airlines and MROs that manage their maintenance and that manage the digital content. And we've been in business since 1997. So we have seen our share of hard times, like 2001 and 2008 and so on. And we've survived through them successfully.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to kind of level set a little bit there.
No, and that's really important. Thanos is a thriving business, software business in the aviation industry based up in Canada. And so, that's really a good point. It's like, what do you do and what's your involvement? And Thanos is, he's been involved in the industry now for, 20 plus years and been really, really engaged. And so really knowledgeable about what's happening in the aviation industry. So we thank you for that. Thanos, I think in the Canadian news also, we've seen some different things happening with different operators up there. We've seen them cutting their flights way back, and we know the Canadian government is preventing flights back and forth internationally right now still at this point in time. But I think we've also seen some different things like operators making decisions to change their strategies. Like recently I heard that one of them was going to begin to operate Dash 8s or Q400s, maybe in freighter configurations. Have you heard about that at all?
Well, I read it in the news, and that's very interesting. The Q400 as an aircraft has taken a lot of competition recently as a passenger aircraft. The divestiture of Bombardier has put the Q400 under de Havilland Canada now, and they will be producing the aircraft per se, and I think de Havilland will issue modification packages. What's interesting is, of course, all the documentation for such aircraft has to be substantially updated with supplementary type certificates, the maintenance programs, the manuals, the job cards, and so on and so forth, because the aircraft have to now operate in a very different mode. And all that involves terrific amount of change to the way maintenance programs are managed and how documentation is made available.
You know, Thanos, I think there's two things going on. One, it's what you're talking about right now about converting a passenger airplane to a freighter or using a passenger airplane to move freight around. But also, I've seen a lot of press about, things are going to open up domestically before they open up internationally. And I think that really leverages the regionals to maybe be the first back carrying people around. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I've talking to our customers on a daily basis for the ongoing technical projects. I also believe that that's likely to happen. It's going to be a lot easier to determine how to fill a 50 to 70 seat aircraft to start with, even if it involves triage, how to quickly disinfect it and turn it around at gates and so on before the same are applied to, let's say, 300 seat aircraft. In flying domestically, you're under the same FAA rules. In flying internationally, you have to ensure that not only at boarding but at landing, you also have to comply with the expectations of the landing authority.
Yeah, and I think also that a lot of these regionals go into smaller airports, and so and they do point to point to smaller airports, and it creates a little bit of more comfort factor for people who are flying.
And they're a vital element of the economy all around. I mean, people have to fly the 1.5, 2 hour distances.
So, guys, we've also seen some of the operators doing different things. Larry, you just mentioned making people comfortable. We've seen some of the operators that are doing different things within the industry. We're seeing them mandating some changes not only in their procedures but also in the type of cargo that they have. We've also seen them parking aircraft, and guys, have you guys seen these photographs and things of aircraft that have been parked on the ground? It's pretty phenomenal to see that kind of a thing.
And what's important is when these aircraft are returned on a gradual way back into service, they actually have to undergo a substantial amount of maintenance. Aircraft, as you well know, are not like a car where you go in and you put in the key and you start it up. If it's been parked for a long time, some very specific maintenance procedures come into play, and they have to be obviously executed according to the maintenance programs that are in play, potentially some modifications, taking into account different standard operating procedures and so on. And these same operating procedures have to also be reflected on, let's say, how the cabin crew needs to operate in going forward into the medium term and possibly the long term.
And you're right, Thanos. Those birds, they don't like to sit on the ground. They need to be flown every day, and getting them back into service just from the airframe standpoint is really a monumental task. And I think you also touched on it. Procedures are going to change, and how the flight attendants interact with the customers and how the airplane is maintained. There's a lot of training and new procedures that are going to have to be documented and complied with.
And I think we'll need some additional leadership from the regulatory authorities and the standards authorities, because they really need to recommend and or in fact ensure that airlines operate under the same operating procedures. You can't have each airline inventing their own methods when it comes to dealing with public, whether it's at the gate or on board and so on and so forth.
And you're
And
spot on, Thanos. It's like every day I'll read another procedure that Alaska came up with, or Delta came up with, or United, and it seems like all the airlines are moving, but there's no coordination around what is the preferred procedure. You know, Delta has the Delta Clean brand, but you know, Alaska has their own sort of thing that they're doing, and I think that just confuses everyone.
Yeah, I saw this morning that United Airlines came out with a requirement for all their crew, you know, to wear masks. And I heard that some of the other airlines were doing that previously. And so, you know, we're seeing things evolving. And one of the things that we're finding is that the airlines are working to say what is going to make the flying public safe and what's going to make them be comfortable, you know, getting back on the airplanes again. And so you guys are absolutely right. We're seeing, you know, things changing. And one of the other things that I'm seeing happening is I'm seeing cleaning procedures and things like that, you know, happening. Have you guys heard any of the discussion about what they're doing to improve and try to make the aircraft, you know, more disinfected?
What I wanted to do is I wanted to offer a paradigm as to standardization. When it was discovered in modern fly-by-wire aircraft that some cellular phones can interfere, the rule was made across the entire industry: turn off your damn phone. Okay?
Yeah.
Even though you had turboprops with cables operating the surfaces that could never be affected, you know, instead of having different instructions to different crews from flight to flight, the rule across the industry was don't use your phone. We need that level standardization in the industry and a cross between the public health recommendations and the aviation controlling bodies.
No, I agree, Thanos, and I just you know, at this point, it doesn't seem like we're getting a lot of leadership out of the regulators or the industry groups, and I think that's another reason to continue this discussion. But you know, just like in the U.S., the regional governors are kind of working the COVID-19 as a region. We have to see that same sort of cooperation in aviation.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen a few things. Yeah, I've seen a few things coming out, you know, but absolutely not across the board. Like I think a couple weeks ago, we saw EASA, you know, publish some disinfecting guidelines for aircraft and things like that. But, you know, definitely, you know, Larry and Thanos, there have not been, you know, broad sweeping guidelines, you know, that have been put out. It's been pretty much each airline, you know, positioning and maneuvering to figure out what's going to work for their operation right now. Yeah. So that could be a problem.
As we start to evolve the dialogue, the regulators and the industry groups are going to play a key role in helping us have standards across the globe.
Yeah, no question. Yeah.
On every flight you get, the cabin crew teaches you how to use a life vest, even though it's a continental flight, right?
Yeah.
So the same sort of level of standardization needs to come across the industry.
Yeah. You know, when they have completely different procedures that are happening, one of the things I saw recently was that they were carrying cargo, you know, in the aircraft. And when they're carrying cargo in the seats of the aircraft, that's not a normal operation. You know, they're putting boxes in the seats and they're putting, you know, cargo nets over them. And, you know, so you guys are saying we have to have changes in procedures, you know, that's absolutely true. And together we have to work together. Now, let's give these guys credit is that innovation resulted in somebody saying we need supplies in certain places. So let's use the aircraft that we have and let's make this happen. Let's make it safe and secure at the same time. But at the same time, I have no idea what the regulations say about carrying cargo in the seats, you know, and flight attendants that are required. And, you know, and I'm not an expert in that area and I don't know how it's been addressed, but we're all going to have to work together. We're going to have to say, what are the demands of the industry? You know, how do we create innovation to be able to address those demands in the industry? And then what are the regulations and what things do we have to do in order to be able to create success in the industry? So I just think that was a really innovative approach to saying we got to do this and we got to do this now and let's figure this thing out.
I'm sure they're taking into account weight and balance.
Oh, of course.
And in the case of boxes, you can't ask the boxes to come and move forward to to balance the aircraft, right? So we're dealing with human beings here, both in terms of the people that give the instructions and the passengers. So they have to put some serious thought into it.
Yeah, and I think one of the really cool things is, that STC got processed really quickly to be able to fly that cargo around, and I think it's kind of refreshing to see regulatory bodies react so quickly about getting STC.
Oh, so Larry, was that actually an STC that was processed to be able to do that?
How else you would do it without an STC? And I'm pretty sure I did read Mark that those were STCs.
Okay, all right. Well, that's amazing. So everybody working together, collaborating to make things happen, and that really is a positive indication. Look, we're looking for people in the industry to get together and to be innovative and figure out what are the new demands, what's the new normal, and how do we innovate and how do we adjust accordingly. So hey, Thanos, let's go to kind of a next subject. I wanted to ask, how is this affecting your business specifically in Canada, and what are you guys doing to adjust or to adopt to that?
Well, we're one of the few very fortunate industries. For starters, during this lockdown or self-isolation period, we are absolutely able to work from home. In anticipation that something was coming, in late January, I actually did a test mode in the corporation to ensure all our connectivities from our respective homes were able to come in with VPN tunnels to our servers and so on and so forth. We're overcoming some security challenges of not having to have dual VPN tunnels between, let's say, our home and our customer sites, which we didn't have to do before when we were physically sitting in our offices. But 50% or so of our workforce is international anyways. So we have learned to work from effectively people working from their home. Economically, we were doing extremely well at the end of last year, and we've had a very strong balance sheet, which allowed us to kick off a growth program. And in that program, we were invited in some major RFPs, which involve digital content management. As you well know, as both of you know, regulations as in the US and internationally are pushing people, quote, away from paper and digital data. And in that context, major regionals in the US had us on the table. I think those programs will get postponed to extent through this year, but we expect them to resurrect themselves, let's say, by fourth quarter or early 2021. In the meantime, what we're doing is we're using this precious time in servicing our existing projects and in doing other developments that perhaps we wouldn't have been able to if we were all focused to dealing with immediate demand from our customers. But we support them 24/7, 365, as we always did, and we're fine so far. We depend very much, of course, on the survivability of our customers. If they all go out of business, I don't need to tell you the obvious. But we have found in the past when, for example, through individual specific financial reasons, some operators had to declare Chapter 11, our software was deemed essential for the operation of the airline, as essential as pilots and crew to fly it, because to be able to maintain an airworthy aircraft, you have to manage its maintenance, its flight, its part movement, and so on a system. And therefore, post Chapter 11, we were able to maintain our recurring revenues from those customers. And in fact, we have seen some of those customers re-emerge and become our most valuable customers today. So we are looking forward to another resurgence when things begin turning to normality.
Yeah, Thanos, I'm absolutely certain that during a time when people are struggling, that customer service has got to be an extremely important part. And if you've deemed, or if the government and the airline and you have all deemed this to be an essential component of performing maintenance, which it is, if you have an MRO system, which you do, that's an essential part of operating the airline. For them knowing that you're going to be there and that your company is stable and it's financially, viable, and that you're going to be there throughout their operation. Boy, that's got to really be a comforting fact to know that you're a stable cornerstone in the industry when everybody else is having difficulty.
And we're financially solid enough that we can to some of our customers extended payment terms to ease up their situation a little bit. We do understand that some of our bigger projects will take longer because they've had constraints on their resources. Let's say their contractors have been removed and so on and so forth. And we're planning for a delayed earned value in those projects, but we still foresee a solid position by the end of this year and into next.
You know, Mark and Thanos, I think there's a couple of things that are just really interesting. We saw that picture of all those airplanes that have to be put back into service, and you know, you're going to need some new tools and some new processes to quickly get those airplanes back into service. And I think, Mark, we've talked about digital transformation at airlines. Some airlines are doing it quicker than others, but to get those airplanes back in the air and to maintain them and maintain social distancing, you're going to need an iPad, or you're going to need some of the Aerosoft tools to be able to do that quickly and efficiently.
And there'll be lessons learned by those that don't have them in the challenges that they will be facing in turning those aircraft back again into revenue generating assets. So, and that perhaps will drive even better those RFPs that have been shelved for a while.
And you know what? If I'm working in a hangar, I don't want someone to come and hand me a paper task card. I'd much rather them send me an e-task card and be able to see it on my iPad and sign it off rather than deal with all the handoff of paper that we live with today.
Yeah. Hey, guys, with all those different factors that are changing within the industry, you know, like people reevaluating their operations and maybe running more cargo, or the essential need to create efficiencies, you know, in your maintenance operation, and having the stability of an MRO system. You know, Thanos, I know Aerosoft has a couple of core product lines. You have one core product line which focuses on providing a MRO system, you know, within the industry, and you have another core product line which focuses on providing content and document management. Now, you know, given what we've talked about and the industry and some of the challenges within the industry, can you kind of help us understand, you know, how in an MRO system like the one that you have might be able to be advantageous to maybe different market sectors like regionals or business aircraft? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Our existing customer base is very much the major regionals. What we also have cargo carriers, and we have seen actually increased demands from them because, again, their business is actually flourishing in these difficult times. What we foresee, as we saw after 9/11, is that the business aviation sector will actually increase. And in doing so, there will be a lot more operation of fleets, let's say the way timeshare systems are, timeshare ownership, and they will be running essentially like mini airlines, which means they will need software that is equivalent to the 121 or the European 145 level compliance software to maintain the aircraft. That'll open up the opportunity for our MRO software, Digimate, into that sector, and we intend to take advantage of that opportunity. And as we mentioned earlier, our digital content management systems, we will target again into the regional airlines, which have already been driven by their tier one owners in several cases to be investing in that sector.
Well, that's really interesting. You know, with respect to the MRO systems, and how that might be able to be driven down into the business operations. I think I saw that you know, after 9/11, and also I've seen right now is that people that are able to use business transportation, as you've said, you know, business aircraft, biz jets, have been able to do that in order to get to the destinations that they need to go to, and not have to be as concerned about the surrounding conditions of having other people around them and that type of thing. And I know that the general public not necessarily is going to be able to, you know, fly in the biz jet, but we're going to have this segment of people that are in that position where they can make a decision to be able to fly business jets and are going to do that. So yeah, Thanos,
you know, it's not just business jets. You know, the charter airlines or maybe a King Air, you know, that holds 3 or 4 people. You know, people might feel more comfortable, you know, doing that rather than going to a major airport.
Yeah, yeah. And then Thanos, talk to us a little bit about the other aspect. Now, we talked a little bit about what's happening with maybe some freighter conversions or the complexities in doing that. How does having a content management system contribute to optimizing, supporting of an aircraft like that after you've done such a significant customization or modification of an aircraft, like a conversion to a freighter?
Well, we have customers that are in that situation. So let me give you an example. An initial aircraft, let's say a 5.7 or a 6.7, was shipped from Boeing to an airline, a tier 1 carrier. It operated as a passenger aircraft for a number of years. Then it was sold to a cargo carrier. It had a tremendous amount of supplementary type certificates applied to it that turned it into a cargo aircraft with a different MRO program and so on. And then that changes hands down to another cargo carrier. So let's say today, that new cargo carrier has to do two things: receive a digital revision from Boeing, which is actually still authored for the passenger aircraft. They need to dovetail into that all the STCs that they have written and or have inherited from the previous owner, and then keep adjusting it according to the different utilization for their MRO program. The ability to be able to do that in a digital content management system versus alternative methods is dramatically advantageous.
Yep. And Larry, have you been involved in any of those kind of modifications maybe during your time at Boeing, or have you seen the significance of the contribution of digital data to those kind of program modifications?
Yeah, I think Thanos pretty much hit the nail on the head. As you do those conversions, the amount of STCs and keeping and how do you keep the airplane in compliance? Is a real challenge. So you're going to need to rewrite procedures and have those procedures approved, and again make sure that the airplane is in compliance. And then that's just given the amount of airplanes that we're talking about here, it's a big challenge.
Yeah.
And there is 3 levels of changes, right? There is the OEM based changes that are coming to the aircraft as it was initially shipped to the passenger carrier. There are the STCs that have been applied by 1 or 2 generations of the aircraft living as cargo. And the third level is the different procedures and reasons that the cargo carrier themselves has in adjusting their maintenance accordingly. All those differences have to dovetail into content and be delivered as the compliant job card or work package at the place of execution for keeping the aircraft airworthy.
And I would say, the big carriers, they have tools and processes to be able to do that pretty efficiently. But like we mentioned, the regionals might not always have the best tools and processes to incorporate those changes and to show compliance. And I think that's where some of the Aerosoft tools can really help.
Yeah, that's great. Guys, I'm just, since we are a live broadcast, I'm just quickly taking a look at some of the comments and some of the questions. We actually have a lot of people watching this broadcast right now. And so I thought I would just address a couple of the comments. Somebody here on the live session has said that, my point of view, there will be an increase in cargo flights and the new cargo companies will pop up. And so, that was from Victor Lemmy. And, and after we return to service, these aircraft are going to have reliability issues in the long term. And so, I think that's really a great insight or a great comment is that, when I worked at Northwest Airlines years ago, we were looking at doing some conversion of 747s into cargo. And I'll tell you what, the structures guys were really concerned. They're saying, we're going to do these conversions of these old aircraft into cargo and you're going to fly the heck out of them. And how do I know I'm not going to have any long-term structures problems? And, and they left it up to the engineers, and Boeing, they worked closely with Boeing and ensured that they were safe, modifications to the aircraft, and they were tested and well taken care of. But certainly, asking those questions is a valid, concern, is to say, what kind of reliability issues will there be when you're doing modifications like that? Do you guys have any thoughts on that at all?
Well, in our customer base, for example, there is first generation regional aircraft. I think if the airlines trim back on the size of their fleet, the most likely thing they're going to do is retire the older generation regional aircraft sooner than later. in retiring them, they're probably as likely to become, the way the Q400 is being proposed as a cargo, the likelihood that, let's say, 145 Embraers or CRJ 200s would be moved to a cargo business, that's also a possibility. And again, as you said, Mark, the looking at the underlying structure and in modifying it to carry cargo, there is engineering and substantial STCs that need to be applied to those aircraft because before they're redeployed to their new cargo operators.
Yeah, I guess I was just going to add a couple of points about that. That's a great comment, by the way. But there's only a fixed amount of cargo, that's going to be flying around, and once we get past flying PPE all over the world, what is the real demand for cargo? And certainly, as this thing has evolved, the trade restrictions, we had trade restrictions and tariffs before. I would say that's only going to get worse, if you will, or have more tariffs and more trade restrictions. So I think we will see some growth in the cargo market, but I would be hesitant to say a lot of growth there in the long term. And Mark, this goes back to something that you and I have talked about many times: is people want to get back flying again, and that's really where airlines are going to be profitable, is getting the public back, doing their everyday thing, flying in the airplanes again.
Absolutely. Hey, Larry, I wanted to jump in here real quick, and I wanted to offer to people that are watching. Like I said, we have a lot of people watching this broadcast right now, and we're actually live. And if you want to submit questions to me, we will actually answer your questions live here online. But while people are getting a chance to do that and submit those questions, Thanos, I wanted to throw something back to you again. Is one thing that I think that I've experienced is that I've seen a lot of people very rapidly adopting digital right now because of the requirement for us to communicate digitally, or talk to our doctors or talk to people in business through video or digitally. All of a sudden, it became something that wasn't just nice to have; it became a requirement. All right, and so I'm seeing people adopting that in other markets. How do you think that push on digital will affect people's acceptance of digital and their ability to accept mobile more in our industry?
Well, the generation of mechanics in many of our customers tend to be from an era where they preferred historically using paper. The newer graduates from the maintenance schools are very savvy with the capabilities they have on their mobile phones and so on, and they can't understand how the practices are so much around paper in the tier 2 and tier 3 carriers. So there will be a bigger demand to have capabilities on mobile devices, not just for digital content, for also digital communications, the ability to go back and in a troubleshooting scenario and to deal with another expert at the other end of the line and receive input accordingly and do some work and so on. We're certainly using digital communication as we're doing in this event today. We're certainly using it internally with our staff and with our customers in our support functions and in our project functions.
Mark, I think you mentioned it in the medicine field, or health field in particular. There's telemedicine, which is becoming just mainstream today, and I like to take that telemedicine and kind of put it into our terms of telemaintenance, and it does the things that Thanos just talked about. Telemaintenance, it gives you the procedures right at the airplane, but also gives you the opportunity to collaborate with maintenance control or with other people in your enterprise. In the same way that you would interact with a nurse or a doctor from your home, anyone can interact on the airplane using these telemaintenance tools.
Larry, let me take that one step further. Is that okay? Telemaintenance, that's great. I love that term. Is that given the environment that we're in today, what do you think can be done in order for people to put some new innovation into that? How can we accelerate that and actually make a difference? Or what is, given our circumstances, what has to be done to be able to grow that in our new world, our new normal?
Well, what's happened, Mark, is that first off, you have to have a need, right? And I think what we've seen here is a real forcing function and a real need. You know, I can remember visiting an airline and they were using WhatsApp to be able to communicate back and forth. And you know, now we have more advanced tools, but we also have a real need for these tools that might not close on the business case or the value prop, but in terms of social distancing and efficiencies, you know, there's a real need.
And traditional standards in content for executing maintenance. Even today, the standards by ATA, whether it's ISPEC 2200 or S1000D, they are built so that, believe it or not, you can actually, if you have to, print the instructions and fax them over to Kilimanjaro, no offense intended, so that someone can do the job there. If you have additional information that is captured in a video, in a virtual reality session, and so on, they cannot be central to the process of actually executing the maintenance. So as the OEMs develop newer aircraft or newer models, the standards bodies need to move forward to allow these additional means of communicating the information so that they are allowed to be valid in actually getting the job done. If you always have to reduce things to something that will have to be printed as the common denominator, we can't overcome that first step.
Well, you're right, Thanos. It's, you know, it's as simple as the regulators approving e-signatures, right?
Right.
So, but one comment I was going to make, Mark, is you know, we talked about kind of existing technologies, iPads or mobile devices, but you know, maybe this opens up the door for more advanced things, augmented reality, virtual reality, and being able to, you know, interact with the airplane and interact with your staff using a, you know, a virtual headset. But those are things that we can talk about on other sessions as we.
Yeah, we definitely are going to do that. And, you know, so we've actually been gaining in participation every week in this live session. And I wanted to remind people that that we're committed right now to, at a minimum, going live on Fridays at 9 o'clock Pacific time and doing this broadcast. And we're going to be bringing different people into the sessions, the interview sessions. But our real focus is really to bring leaders and ideas and innovations so that we can together learn from one another and really focus on the recovery of the industry. And so I got a couple more questions here I wanted to just briefly take a look at. So let me just take a look at this here. So there's some people, I have some people here in different worldwide assignments, and I got some people from South America right now that are online that have been watching us here, and they're concerned about the cost of recovery, you know, maybe being 6 to 10 to 12 months in the cost of recovery. And so, you know, maybe we could try to answer this sort of question, you know, for this person here. Would you guys maybe give your thoughts on how we can address the lack of revenue right now and the high cost of not having, you know, traffic over the next 6 to 12 months? And what can we do as leaders in the industry to be able to, you know, make up for that? I know there's no making up for that, but what do we do? I mean, it's a reality. Revenue's down, costs are up, passenger loads are going to be low. How do we deal with that? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, we know, for example, in Delta Endeavor, they've been put back to 80% work schedule and 80% salary. Some CEOs have offered not to receive their income and proposed that the airline employees should consider a reduction in pay rather than being furloughed or terminated as employees. We know for a fact that a big part of the fleets of our customers will be on the ground for a while before they are brought back online. And as I said, the older aircraft are likely to be retired permanently accordingly. So there will be costs. There will be much lower RPMs out there in the industry. So those that have strong financial positions and those that have strong owners are very likely to go forward. Otherwise, the industry will see some rationalization and consolidation.
So, you know, here's the thing, that there is going to be consolidation and downsizing, if you will. There's also got to be government assistance. I mean, certainly in the U.S., there's been a large package. I read today that the Italian government has taken over Alitalia. Alitalia has been for sale forever, and now the government is going to step in and take over as a state-run airline. And I think certainly in Latin America, you'll see that happening as more government intervention in some of the smaller carriers. So that's absolutely going to happen, but let's not be Pollyanna. The next 18 months is going to be hard to make it through, and that's a little bit of the reason for some of these discussions is that have the dialogue about how to use the best with the process.
It's going to be tough. Larry, I wanted to throw something in there. Is when I worked at Boeing, I was in the professional services, the business consulting group, and we had tackled a project to take a look at optimization of materials and maintenance locations at a South American operator, and they were able to very dramatically identify how to reduce the amount of materials that were required, and by using some data and analytics as part of that business consulting group, and how to optimize the maintenance schedules and the parts required, and it made a really significant impact on the cost operation. And so I don't know, it might be time to do some reevaluation of our businesses and look at the parts that we have and why and where they're positioned and what maintenance that we're doing and what schedules are and where we do maintenance. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
So you're right, Mark, and maybe now or in the past when you just didn't have time to do some of these things like optimize your spare parts and optimize your provisioning. Now you maybe have some staff and some bandwidth for your staff, for your employees to think about those things and put in place some of those more innovative ways to manage inventory.
Yeah, optimizing inventory vis-a-vis the reliability statistics that you have behind it. There could be, as we know, there are players in the industry that provide parts by the hour, the way that is engine power by the hour, and so on and so forth. So they may emerge as key players in changing some of the business models for some of the smaller operators, for sure.
Yeah, but I also think these ideas are going to evolve. We're just three guys here talking for a half hour, and we've come up with just a bunch of different ideas on how to take advantage of this crisis, and that kind of dialogue and those kind of ideas are going to continue to grow and grow and grow on a daily basis.
Yeah. Hey guys, I have another question here I wanted to share. There's a question from Mark Pratt's online, and thank you for submitting that question, first of all. And it says, guys, thanks for having this broadcast. My question is, how long do you think it will be until the volume of travelers regains to its peak? And what do you think are some of the determining factors that will bring this back to normal volume? So, Thanos, did you want to start with that?
Well, I can't go into an area that's beyond my expertise. I look at the industry as a supplier, as a software supplier. I would like it to be much faster than perhaps some of the dire messages that are out there. But I believe the standards-based methods have to be applied in triage of passengers, in cleaning aircraft, in getting bilateral agreements on the international routes in place before two things will happen. From a regulatory point of view, people will be allowed to fly. And second and most important, people will gain their confidence to be willing to fly. I know I had 4 flights scheduled in May that had to be canceled, and so did members of my family, and so on and so forth. We're keeping the vouchers so we can use them, and we're looking forward to have the opportunities to use them. So, as I said, those are my projections, anyways.
Yeah, I'm sort of with you, Thanos. I'm not an economist, and I think you could see all sorts of projections of 6 to 12 to 18 months before you see volumes that we might have seen in 2019. But the real challenge is not so much the prediction, but what are we going to proactively do to make that prediction that might have been 18 months, make that prediction 12 or 10 months, and what can we proactively do to lower that curve or change the shape of that trajectory. And the airlines are really, doing a lot of things to create customer comfort to get back on the airplane.
Yeah, and if the airlines aren't prepared, you want the pacing item to be the public health recommendations,
Yes.
so that everything else should be done before, so that when the public health recommendations begin relaxing, everything else has been prepared and is ready to just go. If it's the other way around, and then people have to figure things, oh, what do we do from here? That's just going to extend the period.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I read something about some industry expert gives another prediction about when we might see volumes really increasing.
We all know it's really difficult to predict, when things will return to normal. But one thing that I can absolutely say is that, I think that many industries, are just like the stock market. It's a matter of confidence. Is that stock prices go up when people have confidence in the economy, and and stock prices go down when people have the lack of confidence in maybe certain factors like business or oil prices or whatever. And so, I really strongly believe that as we innovate as leaders and as we look for solutions in the industry, a key part of that is really building confidence in the flying public that the airplanes are going to be safe, they're going to be disinfected, they're going to be clean. And, and so really as leaders, I want to continue, to challenge you as leaders in the industry to innovate, and look for ways for your businesses to be able to, be safe, to be able to build confidence in the industry, make people believe that air transport is a critical component that they can actually use, and for us to be major contributors. When you get a bunch of really smart people together, and they put ideas out there together, collectively, we will solve a problem. And that's exactly what we're doing here, is we're trying to share information to help one another, to solve problems is what we're trying to do.
I know for one, Canada is cold in the winter, and I can't wait for the opportunity to get in a plane to get to warmer places. Whether I'm sailing somewhere in warm North America or somewhere in the warm Mediterranean, as I said, I can't wait for the opportunity to get in one of those planes and to get to a sailboat. So,
Thanos, people are driven to travel. People want to see places. People want to go places. They want to fly to Greece and sail on their boat. And so I know that there is a demand for travel from a commerce perspective and from a personal perspective, and we just have to figure out what are the factors that are going to affect success, and we have to implement those things and be part of the recovery is what we really have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one other thing, I want to just put a quick plug in is that as I've been preparing for these interviews each week, I'm talking to a lot of different industry leaders, and we're setting up scheduled interviews, into the next few weeks. And boy, I cannot tell you how many really innovative ideas I see people doing, and different software products and ideas for solving problems. And so, I really see a lot of encouragement by that, because people are really trying to innovate and solve the problem. And they're looking at what's the demand in the industry and how do we solve the problem, that exists. All right. And so I wanted to tell you, like, for example, I was speaking this morning with one of my friends in Spain who works for Unisys. And on Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock, we've committed to doing interviews at a regular basis on Fridays at 9 o'clock Pacific. But he wasn't able to do it, and we wanted to get some, this information out. And so actually this coming Wednesday, we're actually at 9 o'clock on Pacific time, we're actually going to have an interview with one of the leaders of Unisys in the travel and transportation department. And so I want to invite you to that, and we'll put some more information out about how you can join that. And then also a week from now, next Friday, we have an additional interview with some leaders that have some really great ideas on software and how we're going to do that. And so the reason that we have people on here, like Thanos, is because Thanos, has been in the industry for 20 or 30 plus years at this point in time. And Thanos, you've seen a lot of downturns in the industry in 30 plus years, haven't you?
For certain. As I said to you, we tried a growth curve a week before 9/11 happened, and this year, as I said earlier in our discussion, we were launching a growth curve in December of 2019. We're going to get to the next stage. There is no concern on my part, and we're going to be a player there. I was thinking, the way we show up at a gate now, we show a boarding pass barcode. The equivalent of a health passport or a health tag could be something that will have to be added to that second barcode, so that you actually allow boarding because you've achieved a certain triage within a certain time frame or something like that. All those are ideas that I'm sure somebody is already exploiting.
Absolutely. So, hey guys, I wanted to thank both of you for joining us today. And if Thanos, if somebody wants to reach out to you and have a conversation, about the industry, or to talk to you about some of the products that we've talked about today, your MRO system or your content management system, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way to do that?
Well, our website is that's a good one. Or it's www.aerosoftsys.com, or they can send an email at the website of aerosoftsys.com. They can browse through the products at a high level, and then they can express direct inquiries through the generic email that you're displaying at the bottom of the screen.
So there's an email there. You can reach out to Larry on his LinkedIn. You can reach out to Thanos on his LinkedIn. You can reach out to me on my LinkedIn, or you can email, Airsoft directly. Hey, as we're kind of wrapping things up, I just want to address one more question that I had come up here. It's really just generic, but it says, how can we get involved in this software conversation? At the same time, safety and maybe specific to landing gear, and who should we contact to start this discussion? Mark, thanks for submitting that question. And I actually saw during the middle of this broadcast that you were trying to message me, and I apologize, but it's difficult, to respond to all those things. Of course, why we're doing all this at one time, but thanks for submitting your comment. But listen, how do you join the conversation? Look, reach out to me on LinkedIn via Messenger, and I will start a conversation with you. You can feel free to reach out to Thanos or Larry directly at his email or at their LinkedIns. And we are really encouraging conversations around this topic, because I am absolutely convinced that as leaders in this industry, that when we rally and as we create the innovation that we have in addressing the problems that are around us, recovery will be part of that. And I can't tell you, how important that is that you join in the conversation with us and be part of this. We've had a tremendous attendance, on this live program today. And I want to invite you to join us every Friday morning at 9:00 a.m. Pacific time, and be part of this conversation. And we will do our best to answer your questions, and we will engage. We will be part of this conversation. And during the week or at any other time, if you want to reach out to us on LinkedIn, and we'll be part of it. Hey guys, Larry and Thanos, I want to thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate all the insight that you've given us.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Larry.
Thanks.
Yep. And I always sign things off by saying fair winds and following seas to you, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.